Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Tinnerman Cecil, and on behalf of Susie Spittler and Tom Beck, who tapes these for us, I want to welcome you to the 22nd Ohio Oral History Taping. It is Tuesday, September 10th, 2013, and we will hear about farming today from some of our experts in Miami County. How it has changed, the equipment, the yield, all about farming. So our first speaker is Kenny Kaufman, and I'll turn it over to him. Kenny.
Well, I am Kenny Kaufman. We have farmed 64 years. I live on the farm where I was born. I got married and moved on the farm year of 49. We farmed 320 acres, raised corn, wheat, and tobacco, which my wife hated. When she started to farm, we had a new Ford tractor, one new corn picker, and then rented more ground. We went from a one-row corn picker to a 6-row corn head and a 13-foot grain platform on a 7720 John Deere combine. We hauled most of our grain to Brookville. When we were shelling corn, our son Keith and his wife Karma was helping. Karma was to take a load of corn to the elevator at Brookville. When Karma got to the elevator, there was no corn in the truck. Karma brought the wrong truck. It didn't have any grain on it. The year of 2009, my wife Lucille was shelling corn, and Lucille said, "This is my last year running this combine at 80 years old." I thought I'd better get busy and have a sale. Our auction day was September the 4th, 2010. The combine sold at our sale for $32,000. Now this is a true story. This is a true story. I thought my wife loved me. One day we was out in the chicken house. Lucille was getting the eggs out of the nest, and I was putting feed in the chicken feeder. Lucille goes out and turned the latch on the door closed, not thinking I was in there with 4 old hens. I tried to bust the door latch off, and I couldn't. How can I get out of here? I got in my pocket and got my knife out and used my blade, put in the crack where the latch was on the outside, and I got out. I said to Lucille, I said, "Did you know you locked me in the chicken house?" She said, "No, Lucille said, "No, I am sorry." No. So that's it. Preston.
Okay. Thank you, Kenny. I'm Preston Moat. Barbara Tinnerman kind of set all this up to what we remember from starting in farming. So the first thing I thought of was who influenced me to become a farmer or why. And it must have been the family. Bill Gall was my granddad, Wilbur Moat, Susan Fox, I don't know if anybody remembers her, lived on Shiloh Road. And most of all of the farmers in my family was my mom, Nellie Moat. She seemed like she was the one that kept things going. Kind of got all the families together, and we'd have a planting season or a harvest season, and always had a great big dinner. So that was important to get all the neighbors in to help for free was the dinner. That kind of grew up on 2 or 3 different places. Mom had real bad headaches when I was small. So she kind of farmed me out to one of the relation or down to Susie's. And Susie Fox had an enormous garden. If you liked the shell beans or snap green beans, you didn't want to go to Susie's. But that taught me something pretty important in life, that we ate what we grew. Because back then, you just had seasonal foods. If you ever got a banana at Christmas, it was something special. And I was kind of privileged on that, because my dad worked at Waco Aircraft. I'm talking about when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And once in a while, they'd have a plane come in that would have fresh fruit on it for the employees over at Waco. So Dad would probably stick one of these pockets to bring home to me. So that got me started in the farming. Bought a tractor. I guess it was about 1955. Yeah. And then we started planning on getting into FFA, make a career out of farming. And I met Ray Dolly. And after we met Ray Dolly, it was just almost, he was going to be a farmer. He wasn't going to be a farmer, he was going to be a mechanic. He taught us everything. When we was in the shop in the wintertime, we learned how to overhaul engines or weld or fabricate feeders and stuff that we needed. Come time for spring, he was always out the farm at least once a week, maybe every 2 weeks. Gave us his opinion of stuff and got us together with the right people. He introduced me to Emerson Swank, which is a decob seed dealer. And with him and my grandpa Gall, got my first 10 acres of corn out. And I thought that was a pretty big operation for that time and my age. Next year, my granddad broke his leg and fell off a tree when he was 72 years old, trimming a branch. So it was up to me to farm his farm that year. Just about the time I got done plowing and working the ground, I got a infected tonsil. So I was in the hospital, I was out of the hospital. Ray got the FFA chapter together and all the neighbors, and they planted their corn that year. Had a good crop of corn. Might not have been where we wanted it, but we had a good crop. So as the year went by, we got to cultivate it, and everything worked out fine. Next year, Emerson got us into the 100 bushel decob club. Evidently, up to that time, our yields had been in the 40s to 60s. And that might have been because we was still on a lot of open pollinated corn. Well, when they come out with the hybrids in the 50s, some of the older guys was kind of shy about trying something new. So anyhow, we planted 10 acres of hybrid seed, got 103 bushel to acre, and we really thought we was on top of the world. Go on in 58, we had a wet year. We got our crops out and had a good crop. Long about September started raining. Well, we never got much corn picked until January, February. Then when we did, we got stuck. We had to pull those pickers out. We only had one row full type pickers. Ended up picking a lot of corn in the spring of 59. And the only reason I remember that was we had 3 tractors tied together, and Eichenberry was on the one next to the picker. I guess we pulled too hard on him and laid him up on his side, and he jumped about 15 feet off the tractor. Lucky nobody got hurt. So after that, I met my wife, got married in 61, We was already farming a couple hundred acres in '60 before we got married. Had a crop of wheat. We was ready to pick on or to harvest on the 4th of July or the 10th of July. Yeah, it got raining. We was going to get married on the 15th. So they were on our honeymoon because we didn't have any money because we couldn't get our wheat out of the field. So that didn't start out too good, but it ended up pretty good. We farmed corn, beans. Somebody mentioned tobacco. That must have been the seal Kenny was talking about. We had 11 acres of tobacco the first year we was married. Last year we raised tobacco, we had 24. And I did it again that year. I come down with a bleeding ulcer. So that was just about the end of my farm days. So we got that done. There wasn't any market for tobacco, so we had to take the tobacco to the co-op up in Greenville. And they didn't pay you for the tobacco until they actually sold it. So they wanted our money to live on that year. Well, tobacco was usually the mortgage payment. If you bought a farm, you'd set your mortgage up to pay it after you had sold your tobacco that year. Somehow we survived and got that taken care of. And a few years later, got drafted. So that finished the farming career till about '73 when we got back. Went back to the home place. Didn't have enough money to get back in the farming full time, so we used the same tenant we had while we was in the service. Am I 10 minutes up yet?
No.
Seemed like I'm awful windy today.
You're fine.
So we went ahead with that tenant for a while, and then my son got into ag school, and he wanted to try his hand at farming, so we turned the farm over to him. And he did real good. A lot different than the machinery I bought. Yeah, I had a two-bottom tractor. He ended up buying a 5-bottom to start with. I had a pull-type 4-foot cut House Chalmers combine.
Yep.
He bought a 510 John Deere, or a 510 Massey Ferguson, sorry. So times change. Yields was a lot better. Yields is up to like the 160s, 170s. I was happy with 100 when I was in it. And then one day our fuel man walked in the door, Ross Nestle, and he says, "I'm going to retire." I had a nice business. He said, "I'm just going to sell out to somebody." I told Kevin, I said, "We don't have enough ground for 2 families to live on. There might be an opportunity to get the fuel business." So I took the fuel business away from Ross and put it in Kevin's hands, and we still got the farm, but we rented out. We went from a low input crops back in the 50s. We were still getting about $2 for corn. But nowadays, we're into high input cost on corn. Our prices have come up. Last year was undoubtedly some of the highest prices I've ever seen in corn. But our input costs are going up as well. Counting ground, where we used to buy farm ground for $2,500 an acre, they're paying $12,000 an acre for now. But somehow we all survive. Price of new machinery, and you'd almost buy a farm for what you pay for a combine. And we keep getting diseases that we never seen before. We keep getting insects we never seen before. Just like the emerald ash borer, where did it come and how did it get started so quick? So a couple years ago, we got interested in what was actually in our ground. And with the help from some young people that's had a lot more training in agriculture ground than what I had, we've started doing a bacteria study to try to take care of the fungus that we have and we don't know how to get rid of and the different diseases. So that's about the history of my life on farming, and it's still ongoing. We've got test plots in 5 counties this year. Ty's got a couple out in his place, and we'll just see how it comes out this year, whether our treatments is helping anything or whether we'll go ahead and keep pursuing this or whether we say quit. So that's about the end of my story. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. I'm Jerry Jackson, and I got a picture here that where my dad started a beef cattle setup in spring of '57, and he was coming along real good with it, and then it turned bad for us. He had the cerebral hemorrhage and died, and so that left me and my 2 brothers and mother to look after things. So it was quite a ordeal to go through, because we had 200 head of feeder cattle when he passed away and 40 milk cows. My brother Dean, he was taking care of the dairy at the time, and I was doing the field work. And then where it really started though was back with when I started in high school. I started in with Ray Dowley at in the FFA department, and we followed that clear through school, and he helped a lot as far as different practices and all that come along. So when I graduated in '56, we started this setup, and then we had then in '59, the Dayton Power and Light had a rural development thing that we got selected for having a up-to-date dairy and feeding set up, because we'd built a silo and had a Lazy Susan feeder around it to feed the cattle with. And so that saved a lot of work for the amount of cattle we was taking care of. And then we started out with a 2-row planter, and then in '59 I got a 4-row, so I thought we really speeded things up, because it went so much faster, but now it's gotten a lot bigger than that. And then we had a fire, so I lost our big barn, and in the meantime, things was pretty tight, so I got a job at TWA, and I got laid off in Dayton in '86, and then I waited 4 years, and then I went to St. Louis, but then my boys was big enough to take over, and they went ahead with the farming, and I moved to St. Louis for 10 years. And then I'd have vacation in spring and the fall, so I could come home and help them plant and harvest. And then Joe he's taken over full-time farming with him and his family, and I help him farm and now haul grain and work ground for him. That's about all I have, Jan.
Okay, well, when I was little, we raised tobacco and stuff, my mom and dad and my grandpa and uncle. And I guess they said when I was 3 years old, they'd put me on the tractor and I'd pull the hand clutch back on the old WD and pull up so they could load the tobacco wagons. And it seemed like I always liked tractors ever since then. And as I was when I was fit to plow, I'd get up in the morning, go out and plow in the morning before it was time to go to school. Sometimes I'd have to help. We had chickens and cows, and I have to help milk and stuff, and do the feeding in the evenings. And it seemed like I was always on the farm, and then like the rest of them come Ray Dowley come along and got in high school there with him, and got sheep and took sheep to the fair and chickens to the fair, and they give me, my dad and uncle give me a little ground to farm and stuff, so it just kept going. And then when I graduated, I rented some ground from Harry Swartz, and I just kept growing from there. And then after school, or after I graduated, what was it, four years later, I guess, I got married and moved into where my grandpa lives. I put a mobile home in there, and he'd bought that farm in 1915, and later on when he passed away, I moved in the house, and I've been there my whole life. So, but things has really changed from 2-bottom plow to 2-row planter to 4-row, and 4-bottom plows and 6-bottom plows and 12-row planters now, and some of them are up to 16 and 24. So stuff on the planters and equipment has really changed from the time I can remember all the way up to now. Fertilizer is the same way. We used to use, we rotated crops and stuff from wheat and oats and soybeans back in was hardly even heard of. And because you raised the corn was all raised for the livestock, and tobacco. My mom was telling me the tobacco was always a cash crop. Now the corn and soybeans is a cash crop. I even helped Kenny several years cut tobacco. So I got several years in that. So when I got too big, or well, just when I was really getting big enough to help, Mom and Dad and Grandpa had a heart attack, so they quit raising tobacco. So then I had to go help Kenny. So anyways, you know, the rotations used to be, you know, fertilizer, or not fertilizer, but beans, or not, all mixed up now, wheat and oats and hay and stuff, and now everything's corn and soybeans rotation. So everything has changed quite a bit. The combines back then was a little 5-foot pull-type combine and 1-row planter or 1-row picker, and then went to 2-row picker, and now I even bought an old 2-row mounted picker I'm working on to get fixed up, and I even got an old Alice number 72 pull-type combine. So I guess I'm kind of going back in the old days too, plus all the old tractors I've got. So things have really changed, and fertilizer prices from day one, I guess you might say, when we started, is really went up. I guess Ty could probably tell you the prices on fertilizers back now, but man, they've went up tremendous of what it was. Of course, the price of crops has went up tremendous from what they were back years ago. There, when my brother passed away, I found one ticket there where he hauled some corn in for 97 cents. And here, what was it, last year, I think corn got over $8. So the price of grain has really changed. But you got to have grain at the right time to get them prices too. So well, I think I've covered enough. Turned over to Ty.
My name's Ty Hissong, and I've been around Melton all my life. My dad and my grandpa farmed part-time, but worked jobs in town. I can remember when I was young, helping them. We had, just like these guys talk about, the pull-type combine, the 1-row picker, the 2-row planters. And I just always decided that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to do that full-time. My dad told me I'd never make it full-time farming, so I was determined to prove him wrong, and maybe someday I will. And so a lot of these guys have helped me as we got started. I missed the Ray Dowley era. He retired before I went through high school in FFA. But Keith Kaufman, Kenny's son, was the ag advisor when I received my American Farmer degree. So had some influence there from the Kaufman side. When we were picking corn, I can remember Jerry Jackson coming over with his combine, helping open up the fields. I grew up over at their house a lot, so Jerry had a lot of influence on me. And I decided I was going to go out and do what I could to farm full time. And I helped a lot of people bale hay. My grandpa, he bought me a baler to go out and bale for people. and we bailed. And I bailed for some people by the name of Winston Marie Cope that bought a farm here at the edge of Melton. I was still in high school. I bailed a field for them, and they bought this 80-acre farm, and they asked me if I knew anybody that wanted to farm it. And I said, I sure do. So that's when I started, and I didn't have a combine back then, but that's when Jan helped me a bunch. We did a lot of trading back and forth. Used Jan's combine, his dryer. So when I started out, I did a lot of trading with Jan. Probably the one thing that you talk about agriculture and how technology has changed. I can remember talking with my grandpa many times, and he'd talk about the changes that he'd seen from horse-drawn equipment to picking corn by hand to pickers, and he just told me all the stuff that happened during his lifetime. And he told me about when he bought his first tractor. They made 3 sizes, and he ordered the middle one, went home, and told Grandma he might as well just get the big one. And they pulled the 2-bottom plow. It was a W.C. Alice Chalmers. I don't know how many horse that had back then, but
20-some.
20-some horse. Now we got them on the farm. It's 350 plus. So that's how much it's changed in 75 years. So I thought back then, I thought, gee, I'll never see the change that my grandpa seen. And it looks like we're going to see that much or more through the technology side. Seed and everything has changed through hybrids and stuff like that, but the biggest change is in equipment through technology. Not only have we grown in size from 2 to 16-row planters, but now we deal a lot with GPS, and I have auto steer on the planter. You don't steer the planter when you're going through the field. You don't steer the combine when you're going through the combine. And I just think nowadays, if my grandpa's seen all that, the changes that we have, he would say, yeah, we've seen as many changes as he has. And so what'll happen in the future, I don't know, but we've seen a lot of changes. And I guess I'll let a guy that I grew up with, so I'm Joe Jackson, give his comments.
You covered about everything. My dad, Kenny's my great uncle, and I guess we've got farming in our blood for generations and generations back. And my son wants to farm, and I guess one of the biggest things, 30, 40 years ago, every house on a country road, somebody farmed there. That was 40 acres, 80 acres. Now you can drive down a road and there might only be 1 or 2 people farming. And 30 years from now, now the farms are 1,000 to 2,000 acres, and I don't know what they'll be in 30 years. You'll be farming 5 or 6, 7,000. And nobody has livestock anymore. Everybody used to have livestock, and that's gone. You can't even get feed made in Union Township anymore. All the feed mills have closed up. I know Stolly, he had an elevator in Kessler. We used to go there and get feed. That's long gone, but it's kind of sad to see, you're losing all the farmers, but I guess there'll always be somebody to farm. The equipment's so big now, it's tripled in size, and Dean, I guess you're up.
You always was a man of small, very few words, so you haven't changed a bit.
Get to the point.
Well, I'm going to take a little bit different twist. Nobody said anything about horses to speak of, but I remember the days when I had to get up early in the morning, ride my little pony down and bring the cows up, so it was time to milk at 5 o'clock. And then, after we got the milking done, then I got ready to go to school. Now, Jan's grandfather lived right side of my mom and dad, so when Bill pulled the bus out, I knew I had 10 minutes to get ready. He always had it on time. Make any difference what the weather was, he pulled it out and had her warmed up. But after I got to school, went through the agricultural program, rented my first farm as I was a senior. went to a farm sale and bought my tractor, my cultivators, a disc, and something else which I've forgotten, for $1,450. Now, they wouldn't even talk to you to try to buy something like that today. But I paid off all my machinery the first year on 80 acres of farm ground. I gave half of it to the landlord. I took the other half, paid off all my equipment, and had money left. I said, man, this is my job. I like this. Anyway, times have evolved. I've seen the changing over from horse pulling equipment to, I think my dad had about the first 4-row corn planter in the county. Now, it wasn't 4 rows as a unit. It was 2 John Deere 290 planters that he rigged up to put on the front end of an old WC, which didn't have a live hydraulic, which some of you people may not understand what that is, but these farmers all do, and no power steering on the tractor. Now, when you got to the end, you had to take the tractor out of gear to run the pulley, to run the hydraulic pump. And then you'd build your arms up by turning that unit around on the soft ground. But anyway, he thought he had something really going, and I guess maybe he did, because he'd plant 4 rows instead of 2. Then we have seen one thing that I just don't really care for, and it's farming has become so competitive with one another, where everybody wants to get more. It used to be you'd rent a farm. It was yours if you did a respectable job as long as you wanted to farm it. That don't happen anymore. I've got some ground that I still farm that I call it my Indian farm because it's Apache here and Apache there. Most of it has been sold off for development. Houses are on it. It doesn't make any difference. Somebody's still trying to get it to farm. And I'm just about ready to let them have it. Then I started something when I was 50 years of age that I had never dreamed about, but I read a book about it, and that's making maple syrup. On the farm that my dad farmed, he rented that farm when I was 2 years of age. We've always farmed it. Now my wife and I own it. The farm where we live, my great-grandfather built the house, and that was his farm, and we still live there. My mother was born there. So the old house has a lot of heritage in its walls. Built in 1845, the walls are still as straight on the outside as it was the day it was built. On the inside, there wasn't one of them that were perfectly plumb. Of course, the neighbors couldn't see that, but that's the way it was. Times have changed. We cannot stop change. And like Jerry and the rest of the fellows have said, we have seen a lot of technology come into, and we do not know the limits of what that will be. They call it progress. Sometimes I wonder how much progress we really have, because it used to be Dad would let me go fishing with Grandpa on Saturdays if I had the yard mowed. And I always told him, you better have that lawnmower ready to go on Friday night, because I want it in running condition, because I didn't want to miss a day of fishing with Grandpa. Now we don't even have time to fish. Everybody's in too big a hurry. I'm looking forward to the time when I can retire. I just turned 80 this last July, but the maple syrup business keeps growing every year. And besides that, I like to do that. That's something I really enjoy, working in the woods. Dad and I used to work in the woods every Saturday in the wintertime because he burned firewood in the furnace. And I still like to cut firewood. I do that while I'm resting. I think that's about all I have to say, and I'll let Mr. Albaugh take over from here. Thank you. meeting. I am Jim Allball. I live on Allball Road, along with 6 other Mr. Allballs and 3 Mrs. Allballs, one of which love of my life for nearly 5 decades, Miss Dixie, and 2 daughter-in-laws. We live in 3 separate residences, but there are 10 of us on the road. I'm going to use a little bit of a historical perspective because I think this is going to be recorded for some posterity and possibly even some of my relatives down the road. So I'm going to use a little bit of a family history as part of my presentation. And the questions asked, how did Allball Road get its name? And I'll lead into that. But from a historical perspective, Albert Allball, which is my great-grandfather, started farming in Darke County in about 1880, and then he moved to our present location later in the 80s. We don't know for sure what year. He was not the builder of the house. The house was built in early 80s, as was the barn. We still live in the house of 1880, but they were not the first owners. They were the second owners. That was my great-grandfather, Albert. Albert had a son named Leonard, who was my grandfather. Leonard had 2 sisters, Alma Allball, who married Park Yance, who owned farms where Jan farmed for Bowser. He had another sister, Esther Longenecker, who married Esta Longenecker, who owned the farm where Dean has his maple syrup. So there's a tie-in here historically with all these people sitting here. Jan and I have been a mile apart for 65 years. Of the 67 we've been around, we were a mile and a half for 2 years because I moved to Potsdam for a little while. But anyway, that's a little bit of the historical perspective. And then, of course, my sons grew up there and my grandsons. We've been there for 6 generations, and we're real proud of that. How the road came to get its name, and my dad told the best story that I've heard, that back somewhere around the turn of the century, which would have been the 19th or 28, around 1900, which would have been that 20th century, they wanted to do a history of the county and they needed to fund that. So they went out into the various areas, and if you had the wherewithal to help with this county history, they would name a road for you. So that's the best story I heard. We're sticking to it. I don't know if there's a actual way to find out, but it's been Allball Road since early 1900s at least, so it's probably not going to change. A little bit, again, and I'm doing some of this for my posterity. We still live, as I said, in the original brick house. The bricks for that house were actually baked there on the farm. There was a clay knoll just about 300 yards west of where the house stands. And as a young child, when we farmed those fields, I couldn't understand why anybody would haul bricks out and dump them in the middle of a cornfield. It's just the opposite. That was the breakage from the kiln that sat there back in the 1800s, and this was 1950, so 60 years later, there's still remnants of the brick. They also fired the brick for Marvin Swank's house at the same kiln, and Marvin's house was about another 300-400 yards straight west. Back in the day of transportation, we didn't have semis and big trailers. We had horses and wagons, so they didn't haul bricks any further than they had to. So anyway, interesting sidebar. Things I can remember is as a kid growing up down along the creek on the east side of the property, we had a sugar cane mill. And back in those days, a lot of sugar cane was grown, and they would bring this in and run it through a press, grinder. I'm not sure about the process anymore, but the sap would then be squeezed out and pumped into some pans, evaporating pans. There was a steam engine set there, provided the power to run the grinder and also steam to run the beds to cook this syrup down. Not unlike, I think, what you do with the maple syrup, but that was still in operation when I can remember. So I don't know when you're 2 or 3 years old you can remember those kinds of things, but I remember it in operation just barely. And it's interesting, I made notes here of the influence that Ray Diley had on a number of the people in this room. Well, when I grew up and the word tobacco comes up, hated this stuff. every time I wanted to do something with the few friends that I had, tobacco got in the way. We in the spring of the year, we were shoveling, or spading the beds in preparation for the steamer to come. Couldn't use anything mechanized, couldn't plow it, couldn't use a rotor, you had to spade it. 12 inches deep, 6 inches apart. It was all about keeping kids busy. That's what tobacco was. Now, a lot of years later, I realized that's what bought the groceries. But for all the years that I was on the other end of that thing, Lucille agrees with me because she's smiling, it was all about keeping people occupied, keeping you busy. So I decided, and all I heard was that there's no future in farming, and I knew there wasn't any future in me with tobacco farming. So all through high school, Ray Dyla would try to recruit me to go into the VOAG program, and I said, Ray, I'm not going to farm. I had a cousin who had gone to engineering school, and Ohio State University was doing well, and that's the route I'm taking. Well, finally, about the senior year, a light went off, because I always had enjoyed livestock from the time I was little. I didn't care much about crop production, but I loved the cows. I remember we had Guernsey cows and Hampshire hogs and White Rock chickens, and I just enjoyed working with the animals, and that's a love that I still enjoy today. So my passion was working with animals, not necessarily raising crops. And so finally, about my senior year, I decided, you know, a good friend of mine, we used to exhibit a lot of county fairs during the years I grew up, and I met a VOAG teacher from Preble County who was living the dream. He had, by virtue of teaching, he was able to help young people and learn the ways of farming. It provided income that supported his hobby of farming, because there wasn't a lot of cash generated in the 50s and 60s from cash crops and farming. They talked about tobacco was it, and if you hated tobacco, man, you didn't have much of a shot. I got to quit saying that. We talk about this occasionally at breakfast, how some of the people really got along well with that stuff, and I never did. But anyway, finally about my senior year, I talked to Mr. Diley, and I said, Mr. Diley, I think I would like to consider the possibility of going into vocational agriculture instruction, maybe be a VOAG teacher. Not that I wanted to teach so much, but I liked the fact that you'd be off in the summers and I could go to the fairs and I could teach and I could make a living and still be on the farm. So, well, Ray was always looking for recruits that wanted to follow in his footsteps, so he welcomed me right on board, you know. And so anyway, when Jan and all the guys were seniors, I was a freshman. I was a senior in the freshman class. I did win Star Greenhand though, Ty. Yeah, as a senior. Anyway, so Ray reinforced the fact that plan kind of got circumvented. I never really got to college. So we got a job in town, and I wasn't really going to farm. I had working at the NCR with Jan's Uncle Dale and different people, and back in the 60s, if you went to Dayton and went to Frigidaire, General Motors, NCR, and you got a job, you're set. Just sit back and let the good times roll. And I thought that probably was where I was going to be. And Jerry, it's interesting, we're all sitting here, and your brother Dean, I rode to work with him for 3 or 4 years, second shift. Dean said, Jim, you need to get back out there on the farm. I was helping my dad, living in town, helping Dad, and Jim, you really need to get out there and get involved with that farm, because that's what you want to do. Well, I didn't know that's what I wanted to do, and Dean just persisted. He can be a little persistent, I guess you'd agree. But anyway, that was one of the influences back there in the early 70s. It got me back in, so I decided, well, I've got to have a conversation with my dad. I don't know how many people have tried to have a conversation with your dad. It's not easy. And if you have sons, it's even tougher. It's tougher for dad and son. But anyway, finally conjured up enough confidence and courage to discuss the fact that, I'd like to take over, which means you're out. And, well, he really was ready for that. He had fought all the battles and so forth, and gone through all the years of very little profits and hard work, and equipment was worn out. He was worn out. And so anyway, long story short, we got involved with that. Continued with the livestock, and is my time up yet? I'm running pretty long here. As I said, we always liked livestock. We prided ourselves in trying to have high quality livestock, and I got into the purebred hog business. That was the thing that I really enjoyed, and enjoyed a good bit of success. And a little sidebar to that, and I'm talking about my dad here, and the dad left way too soon. He was only 60-some years old when he passed. But anyway, I had been working really hard, and we'd been competing on a national level with our hogs. We had registered stock, and we thought we were doing pretty good. And the last conversation I had with him was in March of 1979. He was in the hospital. How are the pigs looking? Well, they were just babies. They were just about 6 weeks old. And I said, Dad, I think we're going to be okay. That year we won 3 state fairs with those hogs. Excuse me. That's 30 years ago, and I still have a little trouble talking about that. But anyway, we've continued with livestock, and the crop situation has changed. The acreage situation has gotten adjusted through a lot of circumstances. Everybody's aware of that. But we still continue to keep livestock, try to keep high-quality livestock. And the last 2 years, my grandsons have had the champion born and raised heifer at the county fair. And this year, we finally, again, after a 30-year absence, had the champion barrow at the county fair, which, if you've competed, you understand what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it sounds like an easy task. It really isn't. There are 250 some others that he had to beat to win that. So we're happy with that. We're going to continue doing what we're doing. We've had a good life out there, and we're working on the 140-year-old house as an ongoing project. I left there an hour ago to come in here, so I'll go back and work on that. But it's been fun. Barb, I certainly want to appreciate or thank you for the opportunity for us to come here, and I think they're all going to probably say some more things. But one other comment I wanted to make, and as we're sitting here, and I'm really humbled by the group that's assembled here to even be part of them, but for a number of years, I worked with various volunteers at the county fair board, at the county fair, Miami County Agricultural Society, and it's interesting that when you read down the list here, Joe Jackson, Jerry Jackson, Jan Strasser, whose brother Bill was on the board for him for years, and Jan helped with the tractor pulls, brought equipment in. Ty Hissong was on the board for a number of years. Dean Donor was on that board. Joe Jackson, as I mentioned, all had time to give back. They made a good living doing what they all had time to give back. Kenny Kaufman was very involved in the Veterans Memorial here in town, gave a lot of time and effort to that. Preston found time to serve the public as a trustee for a number of years. I think it speaks very highly of the group you've got assembled here, and I don't think that was your intention from the onset. But anyway, I just want to comment that I'm really proud to be part of this group, and thank you for the invitation.
Anybody else have any other comments, questions?
I'd like to touch a little bit on what Ty was talking about. Everybody hears about GPS, and you can't get lost with it.
Right.
I've got in my hand here, which we'll pass around so people can see it. This is our corn crop from 12. That was mapped by GPS. It's got the different colors. It tells us what the yield was. So this year when we planted, they took this information and they fed it into the computer. And they fertilized according to what we got last year off of that planting. And they adjust the fertilizer, they adjust the seed rate. So we'll see this year what happens. This is our first try at it. That's amazing to set in a tractor and try to find something to do. But you can't touch this. You can't touch nothing. Yeah. Well, once the kid, Matt Baker parks for me. He lets me right in there to just satisfy my need to be in a tractor. But once he pushes that button, it just takes over. It does the whole thing. And then we had a Jackson involved in this. You might know her, Amanda. She did the testing on our crops. Gave us the protein test and what my soil needed, what we needed to do to change it. And then I believe she had a baby, which I think's here. Where's Grandma? So, just as you said, everybody's involved with everybody else here. At some time along the line, we cross paths.
And I think that's one thing it says as a whole, as farmers, I guess especially in Miami County, I talked about those that helped me get started. And, a lot of business, you compete, and Dean talks about the times that, now it is competing. But there are those times where you help each other too. I can remember when Dean was in a car accident, and a bunch of us come and helped raise costs. I think that's one thing it says about farmers, that they're always there to help those that need help.
Yeah, it's a real nice community we live in. I would like to tell about one thing when Jan made reference to working in the tobacco. And I too helped the same people take in tobacco. Never raised a crop, Dad did, but I never raised any myself. But Jan was taking a load of tobacco up to the shed, and one corner fell off onto the ground. Well, Grandpa Bill had piled it on there, and Jan come back and says, "Your load of tobacco fell off. You didn't pile it right." And I'll never forget that. And he wasn't hardly old enough to be able to climb up on the tractor, but he took her to the barn. And I was the same way. I drove the tractor to take in hay for Dad's hired hand, and he would start it, and all I had to do was steer the thing. Now then, that's a no-no. You can't hire children that age, But like Jim said, they kept the kids busy, and they didn't have near as much problem with the younger generation getting into trouble as we do nowadays.
Sure.
He was too tired to get in trouble.
I can remember when I was a kid, we'd take grain to the elevator. Forgot about that. We'd take grain to the elevator. And that was on your corn, and you maybe get 80 or 90 bushel on a wagon, and now you take a semi with 1,000 bushel plus in the elevator. So that's changed quite a bit.
Sometimes more if you're overloaded.
Yeah. Jackson, he always overloads it. Then they used to help me drive the tractor and leave baling hay.
Yep.
Wasn't very old.
One comment I did want to make relative to Kenny, and we set different yield levels throughout the year and goals over, but I can remember, and I don't know the year, but 68, 69 right in there somewhere. And Kenny was selling Northrop King seed, and he had a product, I think it was called 610. Was that the right number? And it was a new product, and Kenny says, "This is going to be good. You want to maybe plant her a little thicker." Well, we put it on some ground where we had manured the heck out of it, turned down some sod, and I think we harvested over 1,000 bushels off that 6-acre field. Was 150 plus. It was unheard of back then. But that went back, and that was all under the direction of Mr. Kaufman.
We have another comment from a person in our audience. Jerry, you want to make some comments?
I'm Jerry Long. I've lived in the suburbs of Kessler since 1942. My folks moved there then. I was 4 years old. I just wanted to mention some things about the early days, how things were. When I guess probably in the 40s, there wasn't a whole lot of fertilizer used, but there was what they called 3-12-12. Probably cost in the neighborhood of $40, $50 a ton. Seed corn was $8 to $10 a bag. I can remember my dad milked a few cows. There was 40 acres on the farm that we lived on, owned. And my dad milked about 12 head of cows. And he also worked, during the war, he worked at Aero Products at Vandalia, because 40 acres wasn't quite enough to make a living for a family. But I can remember him taking in loose hay, shocking corn in the field, shred it in the fall. One had 2 hay mows, loose hay in one hay mow, and shredded corn fodder in the other one. It's just, things were so much different then. I can't think what I want to say. I decided when I was about 9 years old that I was going to farm. My folks thought I was going to go to college, and I said, I don't need to go to college to farm, and I didn't go. But for a long time, well, my dad bought a gas truck like Wilson's have here in Milton in 1951. So that's when I started farming the 40 acres with his help. And when I was about 15 or so, I rented a little ground. I'd rent ground that nobody else wanted to farm. I had one place, one 20-acre farm in 5 fields. And I just slowly farmed a little more through my school years. I think when I was about 14, I bought an old 1935 John Deere tractor for $135, $150. And slowly accumulated a little machinery. Not big stuff, but never did have any machinery other than what I called Erdl stuff. I guess that's all I've got to say.
Any other comments? Anybody else have any comments when I make about farming things?
Hey, this has been most interesting. Thank you, thank you, thank you very, very much. It's been an honor to have you here, and it's an honor what you do. So thank you very much. We really appreciate everything. Thank you.